Forgive me, everybody. I had something in my eyes, so it looks like I've been crying, but I promise I'm fine. No, really, I'm
What
fine.
Char has failed to tell you is that we've just finished watching Sleeping in Light and we are crying.
We were ugly crying the whole time. No, honestly,
Just
if
kidding.
we'd done that, my eyes would be so bloodshot from ugly crying. You would know. You would know.
I mean, do we really take on that live watch, that live rewatch with everybody and just let it go? Like, I don't care.
Oh.
I'll snot cry in front of everybody. That's how much I love the show, right?
I mean, I've probably put worse things out on the internet.
And everyone's like,
marking their days and they watch this crap. Wow.
So welcome everyone to the Zocalo here at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard
New
Time.
time.
9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are All Things Babylon 5. We talk about All Things Babylon 5 because it is one of our, if not our favorite show in the universe. It's at least our second favorite thing in the universe, if not the first.
It's our second favorite thing in the universe, probably our favorite show in the universe.
Is it? I know it's mine, but I don't want to speak for you, Char. Is it yours?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, you know what? This show for 20-something years has just been so incredibly endearing, and the things that I've taken away from it. And I know that it has for our viewers and yourself. Mm-hmm. For a show to have that kind of an impact, that's a special show.
I was talking about it with Carol this morning at brunch, and we were brunching.
Brunching, such a SoCal thing for you to do.
It is. I was brunching at 11:30 because it
nice.
wasn't really
Were you having mimosas?
No, I saved my calories, my Brevari calories for tonight because tonight's so special, because what we're talking about is so special, I broke out the fine Brevari China.
Ooh, and look at that fine cup to go with the fine Brevari. Ooh, fancy.
Yes. So we were talking about like all the different things that I have on my plate. And she goes, you have done all these different podcasts. You and I we were both podcasters on Trek FM. And now you're a current podcaster on the Nerd Party Network. And we're doing this together. And I have a lot of other projects that I do, in my life, and we have things to do in our lives. But she says, you always go back to Babylon 5. She said, why is it? Why is it that show? And I said, because it's the one show that still evokes emotional reactions from me in the same intensity as when I first watched it.
That is so true.
It's not like
it resonates for sure, doesn't it?
We know what's coming. We know the monster behind the corner. We know the emotional pitfall that's going to be happening at the end, of Sleeping in Light. We know all of the beats, but at the same time though, it's so good and it's so emotionally connective still, 25 plus years later, that to this day, we still have to talk about it.
Right. And does the fact that we know still matter? I don't think it does.
Oh, it doesn't.
Good. It still gets you right here.
Just like music, and like art, when you see a particular painting or piece of art, when you see or listen to a particular piece of music, or read a particular book or passage, that.
Yeah. And, especially when you take a little bit of a break from that and then you come back to it, and then it just hits you all over again as strongly as it did the very first time. You've got a good thing here. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Hey, I want to give a shout out to Terry Lynn, who's here, and I hope you are staying warm, because I just looked at the temperature and holy wow, have the Rockies been pummeled, and I am so sorry. I don't know if you know this. I grew up in Wyoming, so I'm in that square state above you. And you know what? Whew, I do not miss those winters. No, I do not. We're both in SoCal, Norman, so we were getting temps in the 90s last week.
Yeah, but it didn't come without its cost, because
now everything's on fire. Yeah.
So
as usual,
into the fire we go. Right.
Right.
So for all of you who are watching or about to watch or going to watch later on, let us raise our Brevari.
Shall we?
It's now an evening show, so we can Brevari.
Let's Brevari it up. Yes. Val 2.
Oh, that is delicious.
Okay, tried to go down the wrong pipe. I've got all sorts of problems going on tonight. Wow. That's what I get for being lazy on my Sunday and just not doing a whole lot of anything.
Well, Char, we'll let you we'll see if we can get that out of your system as I read maybe a Twitter or two before we jump into the main topic.
Sounds good. Yeah. Okay. Kick it out of me. You said you had some really good feedback from people who subscribe to, well, not subscribe, but they follow us on Twitter.
Hmm.
And if you want to do that and you're not doing it, it's the Zocalo.
Yep.
And yeah, so we have a lot of Delenn moments we're going to cover, and we're going to share some of our favorites as well as that from people on Twitter.
When I posted the link, because we put the show image, and link to the show as many days ahead as we can. I'm going to try and be better about that.
Yeah, you know what? This week, you guys hit me and Norm so hard as far as like our actual day jobs go.
Yeah.
We were a little negligent about this one. We're going to try to do better, but yeah, sometimes that's just going to happen. Real life, man.
But even so, we like teased it out and we got a lot of really great responses. And the first thing that I did, though, like after the Sheridan show that we did last week, I put a poll out there for a few days, almost a week, not quite a whole week, but we got 20 votes.
Wow, hey, not bad.
On the poll. And I asked everybody who gave the best speeches in Babylon 5. Who do you think delivered the best speeches in Babylon 5?
Well,
and I only gave 3 choices because there were only really 3 main speech performers.
Okay, and they are
Sheridan, Delenn, and Char.
Okay, so those are all such great candidates. Did Char win, or was it Delenn?
Char overwhelmingly won.
Okay.
But Delenn didn't do too badly. Sheridan received 5% of the votes.
Okay.
Delenn received 15% of the votes, and Char received a whopping 80% of the votes.
Okay, so that's pretty much a landslide. And you know what? Rightfully so. Char cannot be matched, but I'm glad Delenn got some love.
And I think that as we look through these different speeches and different moments, some of her signature moments, I don't know if you agree with me on this, Char, but I always feel that Delenn really is kind of like the spiritual anchor to Babylon 5. Most of her most powerful speeches kind of trend towards the spiritual side of things.
Yeah, although you could make that argument for Char too.
In a different way, I think, though. Like Char is more transformative from a perspective of being a different person, a much angrier person, as he said. But Delenn's is really, like all about the preservation and the sanctity of life.
Yes, very much. Also, I would say Char is more bigger picture.
Yeah.
Kind of like having, like how some news programs will do their final word and try to succinctly put something into one piece that really concisely says what everybody wants to say and just maybe eloquently says it. That's more Char. Delenn, I think, is okay. In that moment, what does the moment need?
Yeah.
And there's Delenn to deliver.
Yeah, she's very present in what she's saying.
She is the one who is.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. I have something to say about that. So before we jump into the speeches, I'm going to read a couple of tweets from the Twitterverse out there.
All right, do it.
So the question was, what were your favorite moments in Delenn's speeches or favorite moments of her story? And Gary the Great responded with, "Here comes the Inquisitor," when Delenn calls Sebastian on his behavior, saying that he takes a little too much enjoyment in it. And Sebastian realizes she's right and gets angry about it. Rarely do we see Delenn put someone in their place so harshly.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And when she does so, then it really means something.
Right.
Yeah. An old art teacher of mine, one of the critiques he gave me on one of my final pieces, he said to me, "Norm, if you put special effects in every scene, like flares or sparkles or explosions, they're not so special anymore, are they?"
That's right. Yeah. It's just like, I don't know, anything that kind of adds a little bit of exclamation to something. Like you can't, when you're writing, you can't put every end every sentence with an exclamation point, because then it loses its whatever you're trying to go for. You can't be that excited all the time. And I know people who do that, and it's so annoying. But
you can't shoot every starship with lens flares.
Right. You just can't. So that when you do use it, dang it, you mean it.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. And I know that what you're going for, your little dig. All right, all right, all right.
It's no
Look,
dig.
you know, a little bit of lens flare never hurt anybody.
Yeah, a
Just not
little
all the
bit.
time. Then you go
That's what
blind.
that's what I'm saying. One more before we jump in, because we have a couple more that I just want to kind of parse them out here.
Yeah.
Psychology says this body is only a shell. You cannot touch me. You cannot harm me. I'm not afraid. Bravest lady in the galaxy and the love of my life. Stand in line, buddy.
Seriously, I was going to say, take a number.
Yeah. With Sheridan being ticket number one, the one.
And priority access. Yes.
The one who will be.
Right. And meanwhile, Lanier's going to fight you. So I hope you're ready.
That's right. And we know what Lanier's capable of. And he's out there.
He's got ranger training. So I hope you've got a fighting pike yourself.
He is sneaky,
Yeah, he got some smarts. So, yeah, you know what? That is probably my favorite line from Comes in the Inquisitor. The whole episode. That quote right there.
It's when she's broken down to her truest moment. What is she about? She's about life, all life.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that comes in as a very close second where she kind of says, "This is my cause."
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. There's something about the way she says, "This body is only a shell. You cannot touch me. You cannot harm me."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she's so unafraid in that moment that I'm beaming for her in that time.
Just to kind of throw a Star Warsian analogy to it, when Yoda says that, the Force is greater, it's luminescent and not this crude matter. That's what I think that Delenn, because once Delenn leaves the mortal shell, once she passes through her mortal coil, she becomes part of a greater song, the soul of the Minbari in total.
Yeah, it's way bigger than just herself.
Exactly. So,
yeah.
All right, let's launch right into it, Char. Let's get into these speeches. What do you say?
I'm here for it. Let's go.
All right, what do you have first? Because we don't put these in order. We're just kind of
no.
No.
Okay, so let's just get the important caveat out of the way. Obviously, one of the best, most finest moments in all of Babylon 5 was Be Somewhere Else and that whole thing.
Pretty much.
Okay, so with that being a given,
let's
put that aside and focus on the others. Because I could talk about that just all hour long and how awesome that whole thing is. I mean, that is the definitive Delenn moment. Okay, while we're talking about Comes the Inquisitor, another thing that I wrote down in my notes is she says, if I fall, someone else will take my place. And another. And another.
Yes.
And just she knows time is going to march on with or without her. And that's super cool.
And as long as she knows that, as long as she makes that declaration, she knows that she's staying true to this choice that she's going to make.
Right. And I also think just in a historical context, there is truth to that. A lot of people say, like hypothetically, if you could kill Hitler, would you do it? Well, would it really matter? Would the name just be changed? Would some other evil force rise up and take his place and do the same things? It's very likely.
It's the movement that you can't, it's the belief that you have to,
Right. And while he might have been at the center of it, that's not to say somebody else could have created the same thing.
Right. Going into a lot of the comic book pantheon of what superheroes usually say, like Batman says, you can't stop, I'm a belief. You can't stop this symbol. I need something bigger than just one man. I need a symbol, a standard, a belief, a reason for criminals to fear. And that's not one person. That is what this person represents. Right. And in this case, Delenn represents the sanctity of all life, not 1 billion, all life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's such a good episode in general for Delenn, really getting to the core of her. And of course, Mira's performance is amazing. And Terry has a great comment about how this really intersects with Mira Furlan, who played Delenn, and how that, all the things that she had to go through in her life. Should we go through that in case there's people out there who do not know?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Okay, let's talk about that. Yeah, okay, Mira
Mhm.
Furlan, before she, was on Babylon 5, was a fantastic actress in what is now the former Yugoslavia. She
Mhm.
was earning basically the equivalent of, I think it's Oscars for movies that she was doing, and she was very big there. She was a household name. And when the government started fighting, it's very much like today where you have to pick sides. And if you're on the wrong side, um, you're the enemy,
Right.
essentially. And she refused to take a side. And she was also in love with somebody on the other side of things, her husband now, Goran Gajic. And eventually things got so bad where she was receiving daily death threats. She was getting, I think, her grandma's flat taken away from her. I mean, they were doing whatever they could to obstruct her life in every way to the point where it was unbearable and they had to leave. They left with nothing and came to New York in 1991 during one of the coldest winters the city has ever had and slept on friends' couches. She was waitressing for a little while, had to start all over. And Babylon 5 was one of those things that helped relaunch her career here in the United States.
Do you think, knowing that what we know about becoming Superman, the way that Joe had to kind of like suffer the past of his own family's, you know, colorful escapades, more or
Ugh,
less,
that's one way
when
of putting it.
when he reads, say, Mira's history, if he ever got that far and wants to
Oh,
know a
he
little bit
knew.
more about you, so
He knew.
do you think he took that into consideration? It's like, you know what, I
Oh,
I
yeah.
I, I understand this person, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I know that Joe knew Mira's history because he wrote little bits of all of the actors into their character. And
Yeah.
what she went through in the former Yugoslavia was something that he found very, very good material for Delenn, and especially when there's the Minbari Civil War. I
Yeah.
think of my beautiful city in
In
flames.
flames.
Bam, right from her life. I mean, there was a point I remember, and I don't exactly remember when, but she came into his office and said, "So, when were you in Yugoslavia?" Because he had understood so well what she had been through and where she was coming from, putting
Mhm.
it into the scripts that she caught on to it and said, "I see what you're doing here."
It gives actors that extra dimension for
Sure,
those
because they can
particular
pull
lines.
from that emotion and that makes their job way easier
Yeah, for
or
sure.
harder. I mean, you have to relive it essentially, but
And I always loved that, because of her, because, she's Eastern European, she has that accent, that's
yes,
part of her
I love her
character, and
accent.
it makes it so unique. But the interesting thing is that, and my speech choice, my first choice, comes all the way from The Gathering, from the pilot episode.
Oh, all
Hmm.
right. Very nice. Before you
Yeah,
get into that, I want to
yeah,
address one comment from Terry.
sure.
Um, she wants to know how Joe found her. Well, she went they were auditioning in New York. And I believe she read with several people, including Ed Wasser, because I read an
Mm-hmm.
interview with him one time where he was helping with the auditioning process. And I think he said something like he was mesmerized by her. And at first, he wasn't sure if she was the right pick for the part based
Right,
on the
right.
other people that he had been working with. But then
Yeah.
she kind of showed what she was made of.
Right, right. I remember that. I remember we've referenced that before. You've brought that point up before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I wish I remembered where that interview came from, but it's definitely out there.
We'll have to reread some of our past notes because that's a great point
Oh man, yeah,
that he was
it's
there.
somewhere. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so much archival information, and then also, there's a book that will be coming out, All Alone in the Night.
Hmm.
That it's a Kickstarter is going to have a lot of detailed behind the scenes, making of type of information. I think the guy who's doing it, his name is Jason Davis, if I
Yes.
recall. I will look
Hmm.
that up. Yeah, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I wish Slice of Sci-Fi was here because she did an interview with him on her podcast, the Babylon podcast. And if you're not out there listening to that, you need to. There's been so much good stuff on there lately. They did an interview with Josh Cox, another one with Marshall Teague, and
Hmm.
then the newest one with Jason. And it's great stuff. I can't wait to dig into the archive because these guys were doing podcasts before most people knew what podcasts were.
Oh yeah, they were like the definitive, which is fantastic because that, with all things Babylon 5, there there weren't really a lot of avenues to go to discuss Babylon 5. I mean, aside from kind
Right.
of like the Usenet group, the JMS Usenet group.
Sure. But at that point in the mid 2000s, that had gotten a lot less active, just with not a whole lot of new information out there.
Right. So it kind of petered off until podcasting.
Yeah. And then, then there's all this stuff. And oh my gosh, it's going to be so much fun. So, anyway, little plug for that.
Yeah. So going back to the gathering, which and going back to the pilot episode, first of all, you may not recognize Mira in the makeup as Delenn because they had
No.
a different androgynous look for them in Bari.
Yes.
You know, they wanted them to be a certain look. They wanted him to be less I wouldn't say less alien, definitely less alien looking than say Jakar, because Jakar even had a different look. Londo had a different look.
Sure.
You know, this was kind of like pilot. How do we test this? But one of the things is that it didn't allow Mira to emote the way that she is capable of doing as an actress. All that aside, one of the scene that I like is when Sinclair, she's sitting in the Zen garden, and Sinclair enters the Zen garden, and she says she's looking at basically the circular waves in the sand, where the rocks have circular waves around them.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Notice the waves, each moving in its own order, predictable, unchanging. But drop in a single stone and see how the pattern changes. Everything around it is altered. This is from your world?" And then Sinclair says, "It's a Japanese stone garden. Since we need so much land for hydroponic crops and oxygen reclamation, setting this aside was tough. One of the designers called it a pool for Zen skinny dipping. All you can do is think about doing it." That's my best, Sinclair. I'm sorry. But Delenn says, "I'm glad it is here. On my world, there are books, thousands of pages about the power of one mind to change the universe, but none say it as clearly as this."
Oh, isn't that good? I'd forgotten about that.
So it goes all the way back to referencing the one, the one who is, the one who was, and the one who will be. And every single time you place the one in their moment of history, change ripples out.
Yes. Oh, very much.
So that's why I like that. It's not the most profound speech, but at the very beginning, you're already seeing the spiritual nature of the Minbari through her.
Yeah, you see that she has kind of this otherworldly wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
That's so much Delenn.
Yeah.
Reminds me also of Jakar when he's talking to Sakai about the ant.
Yep, very much so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good one. Very good pick. I want to bring up, I don't know, pretty much every speech she had before the Great Council. Because every time Delenn speaks before the Great Council, it's pretty much this monologue, right? Mira gets like a full freaking page, if not more, of lines, and she just nails it, delivers it so freaking good. And just, it's pretty difficult, I would think, to shoot in a really dark room with all of that to say and make it look interesting. But the way that she punctuates her speech and the way that the camera kind of moves in this weird little lighted space, they made a way to make it work, which is why they kept doing it, I think. And also just the way Delenn would pound down truth. Mm-hmm. There's this constant thing of whenever this happens, she might as well just end it with a mic drop, if we knew what that was at the time.
Well, shattering a staff is kind of a mic drop, I guess.
Maybe that's the closest thing that we got. Yeah.
I mean, she was like, snap, or in some cases, not snap. In the bloopers, she's like,
right. First, it was too hard. Then it was too easy. And they had to get it just right in that Goldilocks zone. Right. So that it looked like she had some effort, but wasn't exhausting herself making it happen. The poor lady. And props to the props department for making that happen on a very short basis. So the one that I want to think about in particular in sight is in Severed Dreams, where she does break the council. Mm-hmm. And so I'll read a little bit. I don't know if I'll do the whole thing. She says, 3 years. For 3 years, I warned you this day was coming, but you would not listen. Pride, you said. Presumption. And now the shadows are on the move. And on and on and on. Mm-hmm. and she puts the Great Council in their freaking place because up to this point, they've done nothing. They are not interested in participating in the war at all.
Yep. And as I love that speech, and it must have been really difficult for her not to have any emotional dynamic to play off of, because all of the Great Council members in that scene were all hooded. Usually it would be like Kaplan or Moran or even Naroon later on. They would like throw their hood over their take their hood off their head and respond. But nobody did. And I'm not sure why that was in that particular case, because it gave basically it let Delenn say what she wanted to say without interruption. And there was no kind of resistance from the Great Council, because maybe they were that ashamed.
Maybe. And somebody had the audacity to put them in their place.
I loved it too. And this is exactly what happened when the person that was kind of the chamber security, they were like, they're not going to listen. They're not going to hear you, Delenn. They're not going to speak to you. Like, they're not going to speak to you, then they will listen.
Right. Yeah, again, so freaking good.
Yes, it's amazing. That was an amazing scene.
It was.
I have kind of an interesting choice of smaller speeches here, and I want to kind of play them against each other, because this is where when I read these two passages, this is where I feel like there's this like ethereal way that she looks at the universe.
Very much. It's what I love about Delenn. It's one of the many things, but that in particular.
And these two episodes are fairly far apart from one another, but they seem to be almost in concert with our ideology. The first one comes from A Distant Star.
Okay.
You know this one. Everyone knows
sure
this
I do.
one.
It's probably on my list too, sir.
The molecules of your body are the same molecules that make the station and the nebula outside that burn inside the stars themselves. We are star stuff. We are the universe made manifest, trying to figure itself out. And as we have both learned, sometimes the universe needs a change of perspective.
Yes, this is on my list. This is one of my favorite Delenn moments. Oh, and I have a kitty cat in the background. Hi, Ro.
Change
How you doing, buddy? I didn't know he was in here.
You're like,
yeah. What's going on? I've been napping all day. I'm so exhausted. Anyway.
So then I paired this with this other passage from Passing Through Gethsemane, which is one of my favorite episodes. And she says, we believe that the universe itself is conscious in a way we can never truly understand. It is engaged in a search for meaning, so it breaks itself apart, investing its own consciousness in every form of life. We are the universe trying to explain itself.
This is essentially like tying together the same thought. It's just a continuation of that initial thought. So nice work connecting those two. Absolutely. When I first heard the whole star stuff speech, that blew my teenage brain. Like, what if she's right? What if the universe spawned life to consciously try to figure out what it is?
There's a really, I was talking to my buddy Todd, shout out Todd. And
hey Todd.
There's a really funny scene in Animal House. You remember Animal House?
I remember Animal House. Sure do.
And maybe a lot of people out there remember this scene where it was Tom Hulse's character, Pinto. I think that was his name. And he got high with Donald Sutherland's character, a professor, and then two other people. It was Boomer. I think it was Boomer. Is it Boomer? I can't remember any of the names. Anyway, so he was really, really stoned. Tom Hulse's character was. And he said that, so you're saying that our entire universe is essentially an atom in the thumbnail of a giant, which means in our thumbnail is, and then Donald Sutherland, as he can do, says, one tiny little universe. And that, for some odd reason, this is what I think of when I think of what Delenn is saying, is that we're all just this explosion of particles. Each one is kind of like a sensor for the universe, giving back feedback to the universe's own consciousness.
Yep. Yeah. Quite a thought.
Is that out there? I mean, is that too much? I don't
I
think
don't
so.
think so.
At least not in the
No.
realm of what we're talking about,
No, exactly.
right?
Yes. And there I don't even over Jakar, I don't feel like any other character could say that except for Delenn.
Right. That's I think it's because there's there's more nurture in her delivery than what Jakar would be able to deliver because this is she's I'm not saying that she's kind of like mothering the attitude of the language if that's even a phrase, but what I think she's doing is that she's representing this calmness that is in the center of the universe, this general understanding and goodness or pureness of spirit. It's there.
Mm.
It's just that they've forgotten what that means. Right.
Speaking of forgetting, kind of their place, their centering. Let's talk a little bit about young Delenn because I'm inspired by a little bit about what Terry is saying in the comments. She and Ducat, him mentoring her and what have you. Um, and when she basically starts the Earth Minbari War, no mercy, no
Mhm.
mercy. She's so overcome with grief that she loses herself in the bigger picture of it all.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, we all have that. We all have a moment, one moment where we are not ourselves and we make a drastic mistake. That's something that's kind of a theme throughout Babylon 5. And that's Delenn's moment with incredible repercussions, which I think she is trying to atone for the whole rest of her life.
Now, folks, I want to be completely 100% honest. Char and I have not compared notes here.
No, no, no.
Right. But what you just said
Yeah.
really perfectly kind of dovetails into my next choice.
Oh, well, then do it.
So in the episode "And All My Dreams Torn Asunder," this is in season 5. What she says in this next speech, I believe, is the continuation of the sheer regret that she had at the end of In the Beginning, when Moran says, "We're almost at the end." Was it Moran? One of them. Just, oh
I
no,
don't remember. I've not watched that in a long time. Hate to say.
I'm sure Terry Jones would probably let me know. Anyway,
He will. He
so
will.
so somebody, I think it's him, comes into Delenn's. It's Robin Sachs's character. I just don't remember his name. Comes into
Yeah.
her quarters and says, "We're almost at the end of our holy crusade." And then she turns to him and says, and I do believe that she's kneeling down in front of a candle.
Mm.
And she says, "But are we any longer holy?"
Have
Right.
we lost ourselves?
So going back to what you were saying, it's she reflects on the fact that that choice that she made really did a lot of kind of cosmic damage, obviously to the lives lost, but to herself as well.
Very
And
much.
and for this speech in All My Dreams Torn Asunder, this felt the exact same with the exact same sentiment, almost like a continuation. It's when she's sitting down, it's the very end of the episode, and she's kneeling in front of a candle again. And Sheridan goes, "Praying?" And Delenn says,
Oh.
"Not in the sense you mean it, but yes." Sheridan says, "You mind if I join you?"
You had to, didn't you?
I did. Like,
Yeah.
so, what does the candle represent? Life.
Life. Whose
Whose
life?
life? All
All
life.
life.
Every life. Is this one of your picks too?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love this speech.
Then please read it. Please.
We foolish molecules. I don't have the whole thing.
Oh.
I was just going to talk about how we foolish molecules think we're so important, divided by, flags and lines on maps.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes wonder if we've learned anything at all.
It's so just powerful, and maybe it's like, I don't know when Joe comes up with these soliloquies and how, but I do believe that somewhere along the pain of his life, this is something he had to put down on paper to remind himself of that. If you don't mind, I would love to read the entire speech.
Please do.
"We are all born as molecules in the hearts of a billion stars, molecules that do not understand politics or policies or differences. Over a billion years, we foolish molecules forget who we are and where we came from. In desperate acts of ego, we give ourselves names, fight over lines on maps, and pretend that our light is better than everyone else's. The flame reminds us of the peace of those stars that lives on inside of us, the spark that tells us You should know better. The flame also reminds us that life is precious and each flame is unique. When it goes out, it is gone forever, and there will never be another quite like it. So many candles will go out tonight. I wonder some days if we can see anything at all.
I think about this often when I'm reading about war.
Mhm. But think about in in her story, in the arc that she goes through with trying to do the thing of protecting the sanctity of life, one life or a billion, this this speech to me feels like she's failed,
It goes against that core belief, right?
right?
She's sending people off to die, maybe for the greater cause, and nevertheless, does it not just hurt her at her very core? How can it not?
And that's where I tie it all the way back to what happened in the beginning where she says, are we any longer holy? Because everything that you're doing, it's like Londo. Every single decision he makes, no matter how good, compounds the bad that it's doing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's this philosophical question of one life or five. It's like
Right. Yeah. Like, what's acceptable, right?
exactly. And if she, like she said to Sebastian, said, I'm about protecting all life, and then she knows that she can't because she has to weigh the greater good,
Right. I
then
mean,
where
that's
does
a
that leave?
very harsh reality, isn't
Right?
it?
Where does that leave her? And that's why I said at the beginning that she's the true spirituality of the show, because it's spirituality that's wrestling with itself, like
Sure.
every single moment of its existence or of somebody's existence.
Yeah. And in a
Right.
position of leadership, as she and Sheridan are, they do know that at some point, to basically defend the greater good, they are going to have to send off some people to die at some point, and that doesn't make it easy ever.
Right. Like, there's that whole scene in the war room where it was the speech, not the speech, but it was the scene that he had with Erickson. It was that
Uh-huh.
one person or his crew, that ship has to die in order for all of these countless billions to live. And
Right.
and he has to make that choice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think even though he asks Erickson, "Are you married?
Mhm.
Do you have a family? Essentially, are you going to leave people behind?" And the answer is no. That only marginally, I think, makes it feel a little better,
Yeah,
knowing that he's not going to destroy a family. Essentially,
right. And much like these stories go, you kind of shave it with, well, they died heroes. But the point is that they died for something that really didn't have to happen, and it wasn't their war.
and it's still tough. There's still a loss of life.
Mhm.
Even if they did go out in a blaze of glory, they're still gone, and there are repercussions for that. There are people out there who will miss them.
Right. So that's kind of where I believe that this scene was really leaning into.
That's some good stuff. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's probably one of my favorite moments of season 5 is those two in front of the candle.
Yeah, that was powerful. Yeah.
It was. It was really powerful.
So let's take a break from some of that. I have a
We
couple
need
of
to breathe.
I have a couple of more
Do
tweets,
some Twitters.
Twitters.
Yeah.
So from Tally's greatest fan, she says, her speech that ends with break the council and come with me. So furious and badass, but also true in what she says. And as we've mentioned just very recently.
You're darn right.
Yeah.
Delenn is a badass. She doesn't have to be throwing punches to be a badass.
Nope. That's authority and conviction goes a long way. When it
Yeah.
comes to really understanding who's strong and who's cowardly.
Yeah. Well, and Delenn, I mean, she talks the talk, but she can walk it too.
Well, that's really kind of punctuated and put like right in the literal crucible when she's standing in the starfire wheel with
Right.
with Shakiri, and she's like, "Let's go, buddy."
Right?
You know.
And again, she's so unafraid.
Mm-hmm.
The fearlessness, it reminds me a little bit of what Joe says about facing a bully. You can't show them your fear because the moment you do that, then they've got you. But
Right.
if you don't show your fear, then they have everything to lose.
Exactly. Exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's who Delenn is, and that's like that speech that Sheridan gave. Is like, you get knocked down, but just make sure that you get up 2 inches higher than when you fell down.
That's
you
right.
know, or every time you say yes one more time or say no one more time, they can make you say yes.
Right.
It's all about that, that fight. And her fight is that philosophical fight. It's the fight that you cannot touch me, you cannot harm me. You cannot harm, this is
Right.
just a shell of a body, but the you can't harm the belief that's harnessed
Right.
inside.
That's
Right.
right. Love
So,
that.
and I have one more from our very own Terry Lynn.
All right.
So Terry Lynn wrote, "All life we foolish molecules," talking about the different parts of the speech, which we just read. The flame
Yes.
reminds us, which we just read. Severed dreams break with a council speech. See a
Uh-huh.
pattern forming here.
There's some popular ones. Yes.
Life is transitory.
A dream. Yes, that's
Yeah.
on my list too. Thank you.
And let's see, where no shadows fall, we are star stuff.
Yep.
Never forget who I was, what I can do. Strong woman, all capital letters. Absolutely.
Indeed. Well, Joe didn't write just strong women. He wrote strong people, as he said.
Strong characters.
Strong characters.
Strong
Yeah.
characters with strong motivations.
I await a future that doesn't care about whether you're male or female or whatever. If you're a badass, you're just a badass.
True enough. You can't really knock, true conviction and true belief. That's why I always love the whole thing with, I think it was with Grail, is that, it's a Minbari's greatest honor to help and guide a truth seeker.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people write that off as, oh, some silly person on some quest that's never going to have a good answer. But I like the Minbari embracing that. It's so in line with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you got here for the back half of the show, Char?
Okay. Well, since we were talking season 5, one of the last speeches she made was when everybody knows that she and Sheridan are about to depart Babylon 5 in Objects at Rest.
Yep.
And he basically turns over the floor to her, saying, hey, just come up with something, would you please? And she says, when I had to learn English, one of the most difficult words for me was goodbye. There's no corresponding word for goodbye in Minbari. All our partings contain within them the possibility of meeting again in other places, in other times, in other lives. So you'll excuse me if I do not say goodbye.
That is such a great sentiment. And
again, so very Minbari.
What I love about that is it ties into something that I saw for the very first time on a Babylon 5 behind the scenes DVD. And it was Joe talking about the passing of Andreas Katsoulis.
Okay.
And he said that the more important the phrase you have to say, the more important it becomes, the less words it takes to say it. So he said that, will you marry me? 4 words. I love you. 3 words. I'm sorry. 2 words. He said that the hardest word he ever has to write is goodbye, because it's so final in its context.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I saw her say that, I was like, there it is. That's where this comes from.
Uh-huh.
Right. And I was just like, that's where like the genius of Joe kind of looped around itself and shot me square between the eyes. And I was just like,
right?
How does he do that?
Sometimes it all comes full circle and you're just like, damn, sir. You're even better than we thought.
And, the end of that is, our souls are a part of this place, our hopes, the foundation of our future, and we'll pass this way again. And they do.
Yep.
One more time.
They do. One more time.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I can't talk about Sleeping in Light right now. Let's not.
Okay. So that was also on my list, which is because it's an amazing moment.
Cool.
So let's see if I have something that we haven't covered yet.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have one.
Okay, go ahead. I've got another one as well.
Too. You probably have it too. So it's from Confessions and Lamentations.
Okay.
When Delenn and Lenny are about to lock themselves in, with all the diseased aliens. I can't remember their name.
What was it? The Markab?
The Markab. You're right. Thank you. She says, "Don't look away, Captain. All life is transitory, a dream. We'll all come together in the same place at the end of time. If I don't see you again here, I will see you in a little while, in the place where no shadows fall.
Yeah, this is also on my list. And it's one of those moments where, okay, one, the music of Chris Franke gives that scene the life it really needs. Because if you're just hearing the words, I feel
Mhm.
you're like, what are you on, Delenn? She's coming from a completely different place
Right.
with that. And it's beyond the moment. It's beyond the two of them. It's bigger. With his kind of ethereal music in the mix, it gives your brain that cue of that greater wisdom that Delenn has, and it comes together.
Yeah, and when I was watching scenes like this, and a lot of her exposition reminds me of a lot of just the sentiments that the elves had in Lord of the Rings. Because if you're a Tolkien fan, I'm a Tolkien fan. Uh, a lot of the elves, when they left the shores of Middle Earth, they went on to their immortality in a place called the Grey Havens. And somewhere along the line, that same sentiment of the Grey Havens for the elves is a place where no shadows fall. It's
Now, where did Joe get that from?
it's very. I mean, there are a lot of similarities, and we're going
Oh,
to do a
yeah.
show eventually on that. But it's always been speculated that the Minbari were very much like the elves. They were like in the realm of all of the races that are in play in the storylines. The elves, they have this they have this great influence, but at the same time, they kind of stand. They're very standoffish, and they stand and see whether
Uh
or not
huh.
they're going to get encroached on, and only then they're going to act.
Right. They will observe
Mm-hmm.
until they see the need to take action or until they're forced to take action with maybe a mic drop from Delenn.
Right. And then, yeah. And then some of the elves do that, but most of the time they're just like, we're going to leave for our Grey Haven so that we can enjoy our immortality, and we're going to leave this place of burden and of hardship and of suffering. And we're going to
Yeah.
say goodbye to all this and move on, and that's where I really felt very Tolkien-esque quality in that line. So
Very much.
yeah,
Yeah. It's good stuff, though.
that totally is. It really is.
Okay, well, I don't know. This one's not as good, but I love this scene from the Parliament of Dreams where they're doing the Minbari religious ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the best thing about it is not necessarily Delenn's speech, it's Char switching his fruit with Ivanova. But
I remember that.
yeah,
Yeah.
also, but again, I mean, this is kind of like a first, like one of our big tastes of Minbari culture. And
Mhm.
she says in the ceremony, will you follow me into fire, into storm, into darkness, into death? And the nine said, yes. Then do this in testimony to the one who will follow, will bring death couched into promise of new life, and renewal disguised as defeat. From birth through death and renewal, you must put aside old things, old fears, old lives. This is your death, the death of flesh, the death of pain, the death of yesterday. Taste of it, and be not afraid, for I am with you in the end of time. Taste of it. And so it begins.
Dring, dring.
Thank you.
Now, were there an exchange of really serious looks and an eating of a red fruit?
Yes, and there might have been a religious or a marriage ceremony
There
involved.
may have been a marriage ceremony involved. Yeah.
Right. We just don't know whom.
I'm actually really glad you brought this up. I was thinking about putting that on my list, but I wasn't really exactly sure how to phrase my response. But in listening to it, listening to you say it, it still very much smacks of kind of like the Roman Catholic the sacrament of the Eucharist, where I'm
Okay.
not sure if you're familiar with it, but being raised Catholic, it's when Jesus is having the Last Supper, and he holds up the Eucharist, and it's the representation of his body, and he says, this is my body, the blood of the new, or the uh, how did it go? Bad Catholic. Anyway, so
You
this
know
is my
better than
body,
me, atheist.
but he said, he goes, eat this in memory of me, drink of my blood, do this in remembrance of me.
Mm.
So there is kind of like a Eucharistic type of sentiment that's going on with what she's saying, because once you taste of this, then everything that you fear, death and pain and suffering, will all be released so that you can enjoy eternal happiness in the afterlife.
Hmm.
So that's, I mean, if you compare the two, they're
Yeah, a
almost
lot of
exactly,
parallels.
there's a lot of parallels. And that's what you're saying, like the death of life, the death of flesh, the death of this, the death of that in a rebirth. Because, once you shed everything here, your soul will find eternal happiness in the kingdom of heaven. That's what the Catholics believe. So
Okay. Well, cool.
that,
Thank you for explaining that.
as I tried.
You did all right.
So with Delenn having this giant character arc of being kind of like pure Minbari and then being a Minbari and a human hybrid, do you think that she became like, or if she was written more spiritually towards the back half of Babylon 5 than she was in the front half of Babylon 5? Or do you think
Ooh.
like her spirituality was a little bit more universally Minbari and later on a little bit more universally universal for the greater universe?
I've got to go with Universal. Yeah, honestly, I don't think her spiritual side really changed that much. Transformation or no, it was still very much her. It was very much in tone and with respect to the universe at large.
Do you think that there's a little bit more atonement involved later on, like atoning for the sins that we understand after things like the dreaming?
Well, I think when you see that episode, Atonement,
Mhm.
um, I
You got
think,
it. You got
yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that can, I mean, they kind of even go, they touch on it where, like, oh, so that's why you did the transformation. That's why you're fraternizing with the human. It's because you have all this underlying guilt and you're trying to basically repent.
Yeah.
And that might not be entirely untrue. I think maybe trying to be that bridge is in some way, or at least an attempt to try to atone for her past sins, if you will.
Well, I've always wondered, like, why her? There's always the why this character. Why
Uh-huh.
Delenn over everybody else? Why couldn't it have been somebody else? What made it about her? What made it special? Her special that she was able to say, you know what, I'm kind of like this chosen one. Is it destiny? Is it arrogance, like Sebastian was saying?
Right.
Is it a combination of all these different, um, I guess, Messiah type complexes? Like, I'm going to be the one who delivers us. I'm going to be the savior of our people.
Right. And we do not know until that episode in season 4 what Ducat's last words were. You are a child of Valen.
Mhm.
He chose her because of that distinction, but she did not know that.
Right.
So why does Delenn think she's so darn special?
That's what I'd like. I mean, obviously, you have to make a choice as a writer that my character is going to go through this journey. But when you're an audience member, you're thinking, okay, yeah, like if I were Naroon, why not me? Or
Sure.
Shakiri, like why not me? I'm the biggest and the strongest. It has to be me, right? I'm the fiercest warrior. I've slain more of our enemies.
I think the closest answer I can come to is that Delenn believed in the prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
And as a believer, she knew what was going to happen, at least to some extent, certain things falling into place and realizing she could have a part in all of that happening.
Terry Lynn has a couple of really good comments that I'd like to get to before the end of the show.
Sure, do it.
So I don't know if you're a fan of the show Stargate, but she says that she's been watching the Stargate series and the Outer Limits, and she says there are so many one-liners and emotives from B5.
You know what? I've not watched any Stargate. I'm so sorry.
There's a lot of Stargate to catch up on. I don't blame you
I
for not
know.
watching.
Someday it's on
Yeah.
my list of things to eventually watch, but honestly, I need to be confined to a hospital bed for like 2 months to get through all the TV shows I need to watch. There's just so much good stuff out there.
let's not let's not get it. Let's not take it to there.
Yeah, I don't want to do this. Don't get me wrong here. It's just that's what it would honestly take to help me put a serious dent in all the things that I know I should and need to be watching.
She also says that, remember that earlier in the ep, I believe it's with the Markhead, that she soothed the child after her father died. This led
Yes.
Delenn to that moment with Sheridan. Yeah. You
Yep,
know,
yep.
That brings up a really good point, because the Delenn that we saw in Believers, I thought would make a stronger case for helping the child in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and much like I was talking about the elves in Lord of the Rings being um, kind of like being standoffish and not trying to entangle themselves in the morality of the humans. This is
Uh-huh.
where she says, like, well, you know what? We Minbari believe that all these rights are sacred and this is sacred and that's sacred. Who are we to involve ourselves into this, that? I mean, it's a very nebulous non-answer,
Sure.
right? But, you know, with understanding that she is going through this process of being the one that's championing life, all life, you know, one life or 1 billion, she didn't really make the biggest attempt to help there.
Mm, I mean, it's hard to know.
You know,
Honestly, like, yeah, what honestly can you do?
that's the thing, is that she chose not to do anything.
Yeah.
You know, so, and there's a great, Rush being my favorite band, there's a lyric in one of their songs like, when you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Right, right. Sort of like when Joe says, when you say I have no choice, well, you've made that choice.
Exactly. Exactly. So again, that's just in reference to what we're talking about. I find that from that standpoint to where she ends, like, it's just, I find that it's really polarizing, especially the
Mm.
position that she takes there. You know, because
Yeah.
if anybody could have made a difference, it would have been the Minbari.
Maybe so. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
Yeah.
Well,
So
who's to say that the Minbari aren't a little bit hypocritical?
I just think that at that point in time, she was looking at bigger picture issues,
Mm.
like, you
Yeah,
know, the Return of the Shadows and all that kind of stuff.
it's true. She had a lot of other things on her mind,
Yeah.
as
Oh,
did everybody.
and making sure that Sinclair didn't remember 24 hours of the most important 24 hours of
That's
his
right.
life.
He had some holes to burn into his brain first. Yes, these were things. Terry, I love your comment. You must retire to do that. Yes, it's true. I'll watch all these shows when I'm retired and or dead, whichever happens first.
Let's hope retired,
I
because
would
if
love
you,
to retire. We'll just see if that happens to our generation.
yeah, well, I'd like to. I got plans. I got plans to watch more TV. So,
Big goals, big goals.
so we're wrapping this one up, Char.
Yeah, I think that covers a lot of the really hard hitting ones on my list. How about you?
I think so, and I think that, you know, it's very consistent when you really see a lot of the material that she's been given to work with, because they are really focused on not just her reflecting about the greater aspects of spirituality and the cosmos, but how how it kind of helped shape other people along the way in Babylon 5. I
Yeah.
mean, there are times where I really do think it kind of like spills off onto Sheridan. It kind of tempers his, you
Oh, big
know, rough
time.
edges a little bit. Oh, there's that one scene where, you know, she's sitting and asking Chakar for forgiveness. And
Oh,
you
that
go,
scene. Ooh, the last time I watched it, it got me.
it just, you know, like, you know, Chakar's like, you know, someday I will forgive you, but not today. And she's
Right.
trying to make amends for the decisions that she had to make. And it goes back to the one life or a billion. It's all the same. But
Yeah.
she chose to sacrifice the Narn in order to save the greater good.
I think it reflects onto a question that well, an answer to a question that she says earlier in the episode. Want to? No. Have to? Yes.
Yeah. And that's the struggle. I think there's a lot of pain involved with making those decisions, because I don't think she wanted to go to war with the humans. She had to go to
No.
war with the humans.
Right. And she doesn't want to sacrifice Narn for the greater good.
No.
But
There,
given the way it all panned out, would you say that she was right? Yeah,
but that goes
probably.
again, you know,
I mean, right?
for
The needs
anyone,
of the
you know,
many outweighing the needs of the one, if I may pull from another Deep Space franchise.
but that is a very Straczynski-esque line,
Oh, very much.
right?
Yeah,
Because it does end with the greater question:
yeah.
whose needs are greater?
It's always in a balance, isn't it?
Yeah. So anywho,
Oh,
Terry Lynn says you guys are great. Keep it up, and thanks. I
oh,
think that you
thank you.
got Glenn quite well. Thanks, Terry Lynn, for coming in, and I hope you're braving the cold. I hope you get your hot toddy.
Yeah, I hope you do too. It's downright cold where you are, and hope you're safe, staying warm, and you don't have to shovel too much snow.
Yeah, be careful with that. Like
Ugh,
seriously,
that's no fun.
that's backbreaking work for
For
sure.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah, been there, done that. Get a snowblower if you don't have one. Oh my gosh.
Well, I'm going to close this out, Char. I just want to let
Do it.
everyone know that if you want to keep following us and following where we are on social media, we are on Twitter at the Zocalo, or our address is Zocalo Live Cast. You can also follow us on our new pages on Reddit. That's
Mhm.
r/the Zocalo, one word, I believe.
Yep, yep. Yeah, if you guys want to throw in random thoughts on there, please feel free to do so. And Norm, you and I probably need to get a little busier populating that community with some topics to get people talking a little more.
We'll always post our topics for what we're doing on the show here, but you know, we'll do a little bit better job getting into the rhythm and the spirit of things.
Yeah, let's hope work doesn't kick our butts this week.
And it's only going to get busier from here because it is
No,
next
shush
week.
you. I don't want to hear it.
Oh, this week
I
is
know with the holidays fast approaching, it is going to get intense. And, you know, there might be a couple of weeks that we might just have to take off. And I know other people are going to be busy with their holiday stuff too. But when we get there on as far as that goes.
Terry Lynn says, "Where is your page for the store?" You know what,
Oh,
Terry Lynn? It's usually in the show notes, but we can link you that. We'll get you, and
yeah.
we'll post it on Twitter. I'll post it on Twitter.
Yeah. In the meantime, you can go onto tpublic.com. That's where you can get all of our shirts and mugs. And then just search for zcast_designs and you'll find our shop that way.
You know, sure, I had an idea for next week's show, but I'm thinking in the spirit of Halloween, maybe we should tackle and take a look at the Day of the Dead.
Oh, okay. I love that episode. And I would love to do something special on it. Like, what are you thinking? Just an in depth review?
And what it means
Okay.
and the reasons
I'm
why.
game. Let's do it. I would
And
love to watch me some Day of the Dead.
yeah, I haven't visited that in a while, and I really do like that episode. That was written by Neil Gaiman, I believe.
Yes, it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
And Joe had been hounding him down to try and get him to write for Babylon 5 for all 5 seasons. And then it finally happened.
he got Neil Gaiman to do that, and then write his foreword, his introduction for becoming Superman. So
That's
that's the
right.
one, Terry Lynn. Yep, that's the one.
You
Zcast
got it.
underscore
You'll
design.
find
So,
us that way.
all right, so we're
So,
going to be talking about the Day of the Dead next week.
all right. I'm stoked.
Very cool.
Good
Very
idea.
cool. That's going to be fun, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we should wear our costumes.
Well, you can see what I wore to the Halloween party I was at last night. I was a hockey player, complete with black eye and blacked out teeth.
You had a couple of chiclets that were missing.
A little bit.
Yeah. All right,
I don't
folks.
know if I want to do it all again, but you know, if you want to see it, it's there.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that, and hope everyone is too. We'll have that posted up on the social medias for you to find and take a look at and talk about. But until next time, thanks everyone for joining us on the Zocalo, and until next week, be seeing you.
Bye. Have a happy Halloween.